So today we're going to consider and discuss what strategies for thriving public spaces are and what they look like, why they're important, not only for visitors, but also for people who live there every day. So how can a thriving public space change a community, a town, and a region? So this training is focused on using existing resources available to Vermont towns and residents to create thriving downtowns and public spaces. I want to make a note that for most of the resources I mentioned, Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission does not own the material and was not the creator. I'm attempting to share existing free resources from Vermont agencies around the state that are here for you, and they're all cited in the presentation. So inclusive and vibrant public spaces are essential for community and economic development as Vermont continues to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. We're going to examine success stories, illustrating efforts to revitalize ailing towns, explore resources, including digital toolkits and grant opportunities. And again, this is going to be recorded and it's going to be available on the Two Rivers and on the 3CBT websites. And then we're also going to have an option, sorry, my cat is in the way, for Q&A at the end. And the list of resources is also available at the end of the PowerPoint. Basic Zoom etiquette, just stay muted and hold questions. Feel free to pop them in the chat during the presentation and we can address them at the end. And the PowerPoint will also be made public. My goal is to get through this in 30 minutes and then have time for questions. Okay, so my name is Megan Asbury, and I'm a planner with Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission, and I'm contracted with the Vermont Creative Network as a zone agent. So I'm introducing these three groups and initiatives together in this presentation because the creative economy is vital to creating thriving public and private spaces. So Two Rivers is an association of 30 municipalities. It goes from Bradford to Randolph and Hancock, Bridgewater, Hartford, and then back up the Connecticut River to Newbury. We're governed by a board of representatives appointed by each of our member towns, and our primary goals are to advocate for the needs of our member towns. So that means articulating a vision for building a thriving regional economy while enhancing the region's quality of life. The commission staff provides technical services to local, state, and federal levels of government and to the region's nonprofits and businesses. Our offices are located at the King Farm in Woodstock. So if you're in our service area, then we are your regional planning commission. Next, the Vermont Creative Network. It was established by the Vermont legislature in May 2016 as an initiative of the Vermont Arts Council, and it's divided into 6 zones across the state. The network is a broad collective of organizations, businesses, and individuals working to advance Vermont's creative sector. Cornerstone Creative Community, also known as 3CBT, is a zone of the Vermont Creative Network. So our zone includes all 30 towns serviced by Two Rivers, as well as 10 Mount Ascutney Regional Commission towns further south. So if you're located within the 3CBT zone and you consider yourself to be part of the creative sector, which includes fine and visual arts, specialty foods and libations, film and media, design, performing arts, culture and heritage, and literary arts, then you're a member of 3CBT. So the zone is led by the 3CBT Steering Committee of Working Volunteers that's convened by Two Rivers, the Green Mountain Economic Development Corporation, which is also our region's RDC, and the Vermont Council on the Arts. And the goal of the committee is to broaden and build the future partnerships that will be needed within the creative economy at all levels. Okay, so bear with me. This is a text-heavy slide, but we've got to get basics out of the way before we delve into the rest. So brief background on planning in the United States. Planning became a standardized practice and profession in the early 1900s. As most are aware, there's a legacy of inequitable planning that discriminates against people of different races, ages, genders, abilities, and incomes. Health, income, mobility, and other inequities are institutionalized in policies and practices that disproportionately limit opportunity and assign burden to groups based on race, age, gender, sexual orientation, immigration status, and so on. And this can be observed when communities are displaced due to gentrification, when communities report higher rates of disease due to the presence of a hazardous waste facility, or the absence of healthy food, or when communities are excluded from participating in the planning process due to language or logistical barriers. So planning for social equity means recognizing planning practices that have had a disparate impact on certain communities and actively working with affected residents to create better communities for all. So the following terms are necessary to understand and to practice to create thriving public spaces. So first is equity. Equity means providing resources according to need to help diverse populations achieve their highest state of health and other functioning. Equity is an ongoing process of assessing needs, of correcting historical inequities, and creating conditions for optimal outcomes by members of all social identity groups. Diversity, it involves including, understanding, and valuing differences in individual and group characteristics such as race, religion, ethnicity, gender, gender identity and expression, socioeconomic status, age, disability status, and sexual orientation. And then, oh, sorry, the cat is screaming at the dog, my bad. Go on. And then inclusion is an environment that offers affirmation, celebration, and appreciation of different approaches, styles, perspectives, and experiences, thus allowing all individuals to bring in their whole selves and identities to demonstrate their strengths and capacities. So all of this text is taken from the American Planning Association website. And if you'd like more on inclusive language guidelines, you can visit their website, linked at the end of the presentation. Okay. So today we're here to talk about thriving public spaces. So what does that mean and how is it tied to a livable community and placemaking? Let's define those terms using resources from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns and from Community Workshop LLC's DIY Community Cookbook. So a livable community is a place where people of all ages and abilities can thrive with access to appropriate and affordable housing and transit and close proximity to necessary and recreational services, including healthcare, shopping, outdoor spaces, and gathering places. Cultivating public spaces in which to gather, socialize, and engage with others is an integral part of a livable community. Placemaking is about strengthening the connection between people and the places they share by reinventing and re-engaging with public spaces so they are once again in the central focus of public life. The most successful placemaking projects put people at the forefront of creating change in their community. So reflecting on our communities, Vermont is already doing a lot right to attract folks to visit and to live in the state. So why do people want to live and visit here? What are we doing? And how do public spaces interact with and influence private spaces? Vermont is known for village greens, outdoor markets, grange halls, main streets, gardens, trails, and on. And most of which are public. Some may be quasi-public or privatized. So for example, a farmer's market is one of my favorite places to visit throughout the year. I personally live in White River Junction, and I like to go to the Norwich Farmers Market. And that space is public and private. There's no admission fee, and there are private vendors that provide their products for the public to enjoy and to purchase. And so investing in public spaces generally yields positive benefits to private spaces, and the reverse also applies. These places and experiences provide Vermonters with meaningful opportunities to connect with one another, share meals, ideas, music, or just enjoy their area. And having such places within a town or village center can help people feel connected to a place. It can increase economic activity for existing businesses and attract new businesses and visitors, which is needed for a more resilient local economy. A lot of this text comes from the Better Places Toolkit, which I'll get into more shortly. Okay, so how to get started? How can you reinvest in a space in your community? First, you need people with energy. So in this case, energy is including ideas, creativity, and time. These are necessary to take an idea from a thought to a working project. You also need organization. Every initiative needs a point person or group. This keeps the ball moving and it ensures participation from community members. Communication is essential to organizing. So using your town listservs, front porch forum, Facebook, Instagram, as well as posting physical flyers in available places to gather community interest and engagement. For help with organizing your community, you can look to your local planning commission, your historical society and select board, as well as your regional planning commission and regional development corporation. Additionally, nonprofit like quasi-governmental groups, such as the Vermont Council on Rural Development and Preservation Trust Vermont and so on, have people that can help you engage your community. And if you have an idea that involves the creative economy, and it probably does, you can find the zone agent with the Vermont Creative Network for your region. And again, if you're in 3CVT or a member of Two Rivers, I am your zone agent. And we can help steer you in the right direction. And it's highly likely that you are not the only person interested in revitalizing a space. So lastly, most projects need funding. And these are the funding sources that we will touch on briefly today. The first is downtown and village designation programs. These are important because they help you become eligible for tax credits, local, municipal, state, and national grant opportunities, and then tax increment finance districts. Okay, before we get into all that, the funding part, we're going to go over a few free resources that you can use with your community members right now, like tonight, tomorrow, for placemaking. So these three listed are my top 3 favorite in Vermont so far, and I'm going to open with a quote from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. So do-it-yourself community projects all have one ingredient in common. They involve community members working together to bring attention to overlooked spaces by addressing neighborhood issues or demonstrating desired improvements within a public or sometimes private space. So I'm new to Vermont, but the first thing I picked up on moving here was that while these communities are small, they're strong and they address problems collectively. So while outside guidance and funding is certainly helpful, you don't necessarily need it immediately to start impacting your town. So the state, as well as private and nonprofit groups, have free resources for your use. You can use free toolkits in your community, and if you need more help, you can contact your RPC, which again, if you're Orange or Windsor County, Vermont, that's me and the team at Two Rivers. You can also contact your regional development corporation, nonprofits, and so on. So first, Better Places. The Better Places program is managed by the Agency for Commerce and Community Development's Department of Housing and Community Development, in partnership with the Vermont Community Foundation, the Department of Health, and Patronicity. And that program relies on the expertise and support of partners that include the Vermont Arts Council, AARP Vermont, Local Motion, Preservation Trusts, VTrans, and Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food, and Markets. So they have a free toolkit that you can download and use with your community members. Their website also has other wonderful resources, and I will go into their grant program in 2 slides. There's also Community Workshop. So that's founded by Rebecca Sanborn Stone and David Hohenshaw. Sorry if I butchered his last name. They're a consulting group. Rebecca actually lives in Bethel, and they have so many resources to stimulate conversation in your community about making changes to public spaces. So one that I really like is the DIY Community Cookbook, and it's linked in this presentation. So they worked with AARP Vermont, who is also accepting grant applications for community placemaking projects, to create these resources. And I highly encourage you to check them out. They're all free on the website. Lastly, I want to mention Preservation Trust Vermont's inspiration page. You can visit it for exactly that. There are many inspiring stories as well as funding opportunities. And again, all of these links are listed at the end of the presentation. Okay, so back to money, because we always need funding. I want to go over some key opportunities. So first is the importance of downtown and village designation. So this is important for placemaking and livable communities because of opportunities for funding and tax credits. So if once designated, a community is eligible for historic tax credits for interior and exterior building improvements, capital transportation improvement projects. You get priority consideration for other state grants. You're eligible for traffic calming, guide signs for tourism, and so on. So it's not a cash, it's not like direct cash or a grant, but these tax credits essentially redirect income taxes owed by the village or town to help pay for construction bills. So for example, if your tax bill is $10,000, a $4,000 tax credit would reduce your tax bill to $6,000. And these credits are available both at the federal level and with the state of Vermont. So how to do it? You contact the Department of Housing and Community Development. You schedule a pre-application meeting with DHCD in your town. You can build support by reaching out to local merchants, chambers of commerce, regional planning commissions, select boards, and so on. You write the application. Part of that application includes authorization from your select board or town trustees, and you have to show that you have a confirmed planning process. That's a letter that you can get from your RPC, as well as an integrated municipal plan, which your RPC can also help you with. And then you submit it and you present the application to the downtown board. So hundreds of villages and towns in Vermont have received designated status, and your designation lasts for 8 years for both programs. Then you have to apply for renewal. I'm starting with this one because it's generally lower hanging fruit, and it will get you eligible for the tax credits listed above for capital improvement projects. Okay, next. So I briefly mentioned before the Community Challenge Grant through AARP Vermont. That challenge grant provides small grants to fund quick action projects that can help communities become more livable for people of all ages. So in 2023, the AARP Community Challenge is accepting applications across 3 different grant opportunities. 2 of them are new this year. So while that group prioritizes enriching the lives of older adults and senior citizens, as it turns out, what's good for aging populations is generally beneficial for all ages. So this year, there are 3 types. The first is the flagship grant. It's for creating vibrant public spaces that improve open space, parks, and access to amenities. They have given grants that range from several $100s to $50,000. The average grant is about $12K, and I believe that 83% of their grants have been under $20,000. And then new this year is capacity building micro grants. So that's for walkability in community gardens. And then the demonstration grant. So that grant supports demonstration efforts that encourage the replication of promising local efforts. So benefiting residents and improving transportation systems change, implementing accessory dwelling unit design competitions, focused on transportation and housing systems change and their replicability. And there's more info on all of that on their website. And then finally, more complicated than a grant, but with long-lasting benefits when it's done properly, is a tax increment financing district, or TIF. So this is a tool that municipalities can use to finance public infrastructure projects, such as streets, sidewalks, or stormwater management systems. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So in Vermont, establishing a TIF district allows a municipality to designate an area for improvement, to incur debt to finance public infrastructure, and to retain a portion of growth in property tax revenues, which is called the incremental property tax revenue. And that incremental property tax revenue is then used to repay the debt. And they include municipal property taxes and statewide education property taxes. And thus a portion of state education property tax revenue is retained by the municipality for authorized purposes rather than remitted to the state's education fund. And there's a ton more information on that on the state's website. Okay, so now I'm going to give a very condensed version of 3 success stories. And all of this information was pulled from town websites, from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, from the Better Places Toolkit, from Community Workshop, and so on. And I'm doing White River first because they did TIF, and TIF is complicated. So White River Junction is an unincorporated village of about 2,000 people within the town of Hartford. It boomed back in the 1900s with railways, and then it steadily declined, especially into the 90s and 2000s. And then things started improving in the late 2000s and early 2010s when community leaders purchased old buildings and restored them and brought in commercial business and fine arts. So this is about the public and the private sector working together. From community members were literally on the select board themselves and then decided to buy buildings to the town of Hartford. So the images I'm showing here are of the old Polka Dot Diner, which closed years ago before I moved to White River. And it was vacant until Phnom Penh entered around 2016. And then additionally, the building at Bridge and Main Street, which if anyone's familiar with White River, it was vacant from 2005 because of a fire. But then in 2017, it was built into a mixed use building with affordable housing units. So Jewel and Little Istanbul were there. Although Jewel just closed, I'm not sure what's coming, but I personally hope that it's a bagel shop. We'll see. So if you're new to the state like me, you never saw White River in its declining days. I've only been here for 2 years. But from conversations I've had with community members and a lot of research, this town has come a long way in terms of community and economic prosperity. People like living here and visiting here, and I'm biased because I live here. But I think it's important to note because I chose to live in this village because of the amenities that it has. And then again, much of the information here was also garnered from news stories in 7 days, which are linked at the end of the presentation. Okay, so we're going to get a little bit more into the TIF district. So it's complicated for sure. And the idea, in very simple terms, of the TIF district is that a town borrows money to build infrastructure, which helps to spur development and increase tax revenues. And then with the increase in tax revenues, they use it to pay off the debt. So just stay with me as we talk briefly about the finance structure. So in 2008, the town of Hartford received a state municipal planning grant, or MPG, to develop the White River Junction Village Revitalization Plan. The plan laid out a vision for the future, which included increasing density in areas where infrastructure was already in place, and included an assessment of the village's existing infrastructure and utilities. So to encourage greater density and increased housing options in and around White River, an additional planning grant supported the creation of Hartford's designated growth center in 2010, which then opened the door for approval of a TIF district by the Vermont Economic Progress Council in 2011. So as with many communities around the state, there was existing infrastructure in White River Junction, which made it a logical place to invest and grow. But the existing infrastructure was old and it was in poor condition. So despite interest from developers and many properties that were really ready for substantial redevelopment, the lack of water, wastewater, and stormwater capacity was an additional barrier to development. So Hartford was faced with a gap between the deteriorating infrastructure conditions and the financial capacity to upgrade and to build the infrastructure to a standard that would ensure success and development and provide the town with a vibrant downtown. So to bridge that gap, the town of Hartford created a TIF district. So some fun numbers for you: public investments in infrastructure totaling 13 million, are expected to leverage over $60 million in private development. So the base value of the district was about 32 million upon creation, and then 55.5 million in grand list year 2018. And when the TIF is fully developed, it's expected to be 79 million. So this is an increase in value of $47 million. So before the TIF district, the properties in this area sent about $440,000 a year to the education fund. And when the TIF retention period ends, the properties will send more than $1.3 million to the education fund. So in 2016, the villages, the senior housing was getting built, Trailbreak was being built, Tiger Rock expanded, Peace and Pies opened. And through fiscal year 2019, Hartford issued over $3 million of bonds for public improvements. And it's working. Hartford is authorized to issue debt until March 31st of 2024 and to retain 75% of the education tax increment through fiscal year 2034. And so community organizers, select board members, local developers combined with the town of Hartford and then various state and federal funding that they pulled together made all of this possible. And this information was pulled from Valley News as well as from the town of Hartford's website. And there is so much more to get into here, but not enough time today. So I do encourage you to do your own research and to talk to your community members and municipal partners if this interests you. Okay, next example. Rutland. So like most of these projects, this is an example of a combination of community efforts, investment, and participation from the city, nonprofits, RDC, RPC, VTrans, and they also hired a private firm. And again, this is a very condensed example, and I hope that you'll read their scoping study for more in-depth information on their project. So this one is a larger scale for a town much bigger than the village of White River Junction. There's 16,000 people, I believe, that live in Rutland City. And in 2020, the City of Rutland and Downtown Rutland Partnership co-led the reimagining of Center Street. So the City of Rutland started transforming Center Street into a safer, greener, more vibrant place to walk, shop, and dine. Center Street is the heart of downtown, and it's home to retail shops, restaurants, offices, services, and a theater. And it also offers residents and visitors walkable connections to parks, farmers markets, grocery stores, and other shopping. So the City of Rutland planned and implemented the Center Street pilot study with time and funding support through VTrans, the Rutland Redevelopment Authority, the City of Rutland, and Rutland's Regional Planning Commission. So the study process included an extensive planning, community engagement, and design process to build a vibrant, successful Center Street. And the approach was based on goals and strategies to improve the quality and sense of place from Rutland's downtown strategic plan of 2020. And this pilot study tested reconfiguring the street to narrow the travel lanes, increase bike lanes, increase restaurant dining parklets, so where you can dine on the sidewalk. And the temporary demonstration they did was a success, and it received positive feedback from the community through a public survey. So in 2021, the city engaged consulting firm Dubois & King to facilitate a scoping study of the area. And the scoping study report is linked at the bottom there, and it's the outcome of the work. It'll take you way deeper into their planning process. This project is obviously not realistic for every small town or village in our region or in the state, but I hope that it gives some inspiration on what's possible when all of these pieces come together. Okay, now we're going to go smaller scale. So this is a small scale project that's just as meaningful. It's in Rupert, Vermont, which is in Bennington County, and they have a population of under 800 residents. So there was no gathering place in their town. So community members gathered together with municipal and state assistance, and they created the nonprofit Rupert Village Trust to purchase and to revitalize the general store as a community gathering place. So the general store hosts a cafe, an event space. It's adjacent to the village green. It's near community gardens, and it's also connected to the Delaware and Hudson Rail Trail. So support and funding were provided by the town, community members, local businesses, and state and regional funders, many pieces to the process. So the Rupert Village Trust leases space to this independent cafe operator who schedules events and programs and implements a comprehensive marketing plan to assure that the cafe has the best possible chance of long-term success. The Sheldon store had been a part of Rupert's community and history since like the 1800s. And they worked with Preservation Trust Vermont and applied for a revitalization grant, and they were awarded $100,000. And that grant supports structural and roof repairs on the main building and porch. So bringing it back to life as a community center and cafe makes it possible to showcase the history, as well as add economic activity to a town that didn't have any stores or cafes. And by saving this structure that was historically significant for the town, the Sheldon store also became a community hub. They're facilitating conversations and shared activities with neighbors. The upstairs was once a grain shawl and is now can be used for yoga classes, workshops, displaying works of art. And the store is directly adjacent to the Rupert Town Green in its planning stages, which makes it a natural extension of the community space. So there's more information on this project that's still ongoing in the Preservation Trust Vermont website, the Better Places Toolkit, the Town of Rupert's website, and the Rupert Village Trust website. Okay, so in summary, if there's a space that is public or private in your town that could be improved, talk to people. Talk to your neighbors, your friends, your community members about an opportunity with a public or private space in your town or village. And remember that investing in private or public spaces benefits both the public and private sectors. You can loop in select board members and planning commission members, your local regional planning commission and regional development corporation, or your zone agent, which is probably me if you're Two Rivers or Mount Ascutney town. And then explore types of funding. So is your town or village a designated village center or downtown? What grants are you eligible for? Are you in a TIF district? And if not, is that possible for your region? The biggest thing is just not give up, because these things take so much time, but they're not impossible. And it really, all of these have started by a few or more concerned citizens and community members who took the ball, kept it rolling, and then it turned into these much bigger things. So thanks for sticking with me thus far, and let's move to questions if anyone has any. That was a lot of information on many different topics and ideas in a short time. I'm going to stop screen sharing. So if anyone has questions, I can type them into here just so I have them for future reference. Yeah, feel free to raise a hand, speak out loud, or use the chat.
Hi there. I was curious if you had any recommended or what your favorite statewide or Two Rivers resources would be for a community that lacks sufficient town staff capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, here in Bradford, it's essentially run by volunteers. You know, like we employ a couple police officers, town clerk, and then like everything else is volunteerism. So I was actually on a little committee trying to boost town capacity. And we have a little bit of a conservative leaning select board at the moment that didn't really, follow our recommendations about adding an economic development officer or a town administrator or town manager, for example. And so we actually had some good results at this past town meeting where we might have some more progressive leadership, but they're still volunteers, right? And they're still pressed for time.
Right.
So I don't know if there's, some Two Rivers or statewide resources, if there is a strong vision that maybe has some time during the day to help do some research and stuff like that. Or if it's all about building the capacity with staff in your town first.
Do you have a specific project in mind that you want to do?
Well, certainly considering a TIF district would be great, I think, for Bradford Village. Bradford is currently a designated village center, not a designated downtown. And I was actually a reporter for Valley News during Hartford's boomtown era, not the entire time, but 2018 when Leo Puller was still there. And I had to break down what a TIF district is in the paper once or twice. And
well, thank you for that. I think I referenced you in this presentation.
Okay, possibly, yeah. And I don't think any of our select board members have any idea what a TIF district could do to benefit the town. So even just the education piece.
So you're in Bradford, Vermont, right?
Yeah, correct.
My first thing I have to ask you is, have you talked to Monique Priestley?
She's the reason I'm here. She forwarded me the link.
Okay.
Yeah. And she is fantastic. Don't get me wrong. and sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, why do we need an economic development officer when we have Monique? You know, because she pays so much attention, and she does have a lot of awesome projects going on. So yeah, I don't mean to put the cart before the horse. It's just sometimes it is frustrating when, you know, volunteers are burnt out and, you know, you don't get a lot of public participation at meetings and stuff like that. Yeah. And I think I asked Kevin this once too, because he came to a planning commission meeting.
Well, he's here, so you can always chime in if you can still hear us, Kevin.
And I think he said that like Two Rivers in particular doesn't have like, you know, designated people to help volunteers necessarily.
No.
Right. Yeah. So, but I figured I'd pick your brain too, in case you had any like favorite state resources, whether it be from the rural community development organizations, et cetera.
Yeah, so in the presentation, my favorite one was the Better Places Toolkit. That plus community workshops, DIY cookbook. They just, if you go on either of their sites, and I'll send out, I have this like long list of the resources. It literally walks you through like, how do I engage with my community? That's where I would start personally.
Okay.
And then because you do have people like Monique, so for example, she's, you know, busy with the legislature, even though like they're like quasi paid, like they don't get paid enough, obviously, but she did all that work with community members for the Space on Main, right? So there are folks around there who are already invested. So my first suggestion would just to be to talk to who's already there and interested, and then use those free resources to further those conversations. I don't know if you have something you want to add, Kevin.
Sure, I'll add a little bit. The hard part is that we can do limited, you know, assistance to towns, but having so many towns, we can't give them a lot of help outside of cranking it up a notch and actually working for them under contract. Or right now, one of the things that Sydney in the office is working, and in your neck of the woods, she's kind of thinking Bradford and surrounding towns, is some type of shared person, perhaps. So the town might not be able to field a full person, but maybe they can field a third of a person or something. It's much better to try to, and instead of hiring 1/3 of a person and getting that, you could hire a full person, but you know, get a third of their time. And so we'll be having ongoing discussions about that. Those the role of that person is probably grant writing, administration, project management, that type of thing. Because even if you wanted to like go get an ARP grant, and then you get the grant and you've got some paperwork, you know, back and forth. You can have volunteers do that, but it's certainly, you know, you all have stuff on your plate already as volunteers. So being able to do that. And you're right, that's going to take some, you know, select board support for that position eventually.
Is that helpful at all?
Yeah, I missed
it's okay
a little
if
bit.
It's not. I can also
that...
follow up with you via email, and we can chat further about what's going on in Bradford.
Yeah, and
sure.
And let's make sure.
Yeah, I don't want to take the rest of the meeting.
Megan, just make a note, and we'll make sure that Jared gets the Sydney stuff when we're in Bradford.
Sorry, Kevin, what did you say?
Just make a note to Sydney, so that when Sydney's reaching out to Bradford about.
Oh, Sydney's with Bradford. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Does anyone else have a question? So I think we're down to Malia and Christy. Allison had to hop off. Got any questions, Malia?
I got nothing. I don't know. What's your favorite place that you visited in Vermont so far?
My favorite place that I visited in Vermont?
Yeah, like a community gathering space.
Wait, a what space?
A community gathering space.
Oh, in the whole state or like?
Yeah, sure.
I think I haven't, so Rutland's on my list now. I'd like to see what they're doing with Center Street just because I read about it, but I haven't been there. And I have, well, there's a couple. So Burlington did an awesome job with Church Street, you know, like but the problem there is that it's mostly private and there's not a ton of community benches and things like that. So folks, like I don't want someone to come to an area where they feel like they have to like buy a cup of coffee or ice cream in order to be there. But when you go
Right.
down to the waterfront, it's totally public, totally awesome, lots of
Well done.
places for seating, all of that. So that's one good example.
Put some peas
And
in
then
there.
Okay.
another I'm thinking of is here in White River Junction. And again, this is like quasi public private, because White River Junction definitely needs like a town green. We don't have a town center. But the space between Piecemeal Pies and Tucker Box, Jam is like a local media group. And they host free community events. And so does the Main Street Museum in White River Junction. I think those are both really good examples of ways that they're bringing folks in. Sometimes they do suggested donations.
Yeah.
But for example, Friday, I went there as a 3CVT rep for this artist presentation on basically the history of redlining and racial justice in the United States. And it was packed and it was awesome and it was totally free. And
Yeah.
that's what I'm talking about. I think also Royalton has an awesome town green. So those are some of my favorites, but I have not seen the whole state. There's lots of places I haven't been. I'm mostly in the Upper Valley these days. Thanks for asking. Anybody else?
Where did you move from?
Oh, I'm from Orlando, Florida originally. But
Quite a
I
change.
was more recently working in Boston and before that in grad school in Virginia. So calling Vermont home for a while though.
Yeah, I love how far White River has come, and I love Jam being there, and just so many great events all year round.
Truly.
It's been great to see, and I used to live not far from Rutland, so to see how far that's come as well over the decades. There's a lot of great stuff going on, so I commend that, and it's great to hear.
Thank you. Okay, if no one else has anything, we can end early and you can enjoy your Monday evening. But thanks so much for coming and for asking questions. And I'm going to send this out to the folks who registered to get all the resources. It's like a very long list. And then this recording is also going to be posted on the 3CVT website and on Two Rivers. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, Megan.
Have a great night.